Hello and welcome to episode 2 of 50 Famous Stories Retold, a production by The Fighting Moose. I'm your host, Jason Hendrickson. This week, I'd like to introduce a special guest, my son John, as he reads our story titles this week. For this week, the stories are a bit longer, so instead of 4 stories, we are going to look at only 2. Again, these stories come from 50 Famous Stories Retold by James Baldwin. As a reminder, the goal of this podcast is to allow families to gather together and listen to stories which, in the words of Mr. Baldwin, the author of the book, may pique the listener's interest in pursuing broader literary studies. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin.
King John and the Abbot.
There once was a king of England whose name was John. He was a bad king, for he was harsh and cruel to his people, and so long as he could have his own way, he did not care what became of other folks. He was the worst king that England ever had. Now there was in the town of Canterbury a rich old abbot who lived in grand style in a great house called the Abbey. Every day 100 noblemen sat down with him to dine, and 50 brave knights in 5 velvet coats and gold chains waited upon him at his table. When King John heard of the way in which the abbot lived, he made up his mind to put a stop to it. So he sent for the old man to come and see him. "How now, my good abbot?" he said. "I hear that you keep a far better house than I. How dare you do such a thing? Don't you know that no man in the land ought to live better than the king, and I tell you that no man shall?" "O king," said the abbot, "I beg to say that I am spending nothing but what is my own. I hope that you will not think ill of me for making things pleasant for my friends and the brave knights who are with me." "Think ill of you?" said the king. "How can I help but think ill of you? All that there is in this broad land is mine by right, and how do you dare to put me to shame by living in grander style than I? One would think that you were trying to be king in my place." "Oh, do not say so," said the abbot, "for I—" "Not another word," cried the king. "Your fault is plain, and unless you can answer me 3 questions, your head shall be cut off, and all your riches shall be mine." "I will try to answer them, O king," said the abbot. "Well then," said King John, "as I sit here with my crown of gold on my head, you must tell me to within a day just how long I shall live. Secondly, you must tell me how soon I shall ride around the whole world. And lastly, you shall tell me what I think." "O king," said the abbot, "these are deep, hard questions, and I cannot answer them just now. But if you will give me 2 weeks to think about them, I will do the best that I can." "2 weeks you shall have," said the king, "but if then you fail to answer me, you shall lose your head, and all your lands shall be mine." The abbot went away very sad, and in great fear. He first rode to Oxford. Here was a great school called the University, and he wanted to see if any of the wise professors could help him. But they shook their heads and said that there was nothing about King John in any of their books. Then the abbot rode down to Cambridge, where there was another university, but not one of the teachers in that great school could help him. At last, sad and sorrowful, he rode toward home to bid his friends and his brave knights goodbye, for now he had not a week to live. As the abbot was riding up the lane which led to his grand house, he met his shepherd going to the fields. "Welcome home, good master," cried the shepherd. "What news do you bring us from great King John?" Sad news, said the abbot. And then he told him all that had happened. cheer up, good master," said the shepherd. "Have you never yet heard that a fool may teach a wise man wit? I think I can help you out with your trouble." "You help me?" cried the abbot. How? "Well," answered the shepherd, "you know that everybody says that I look just like you, and I have sometimes been mistaken for you. So, lend me your servants and your horse and your gown, and I will go up to London and see the king. If nothing else can be done, I can at least die in your place." "My good shepherd," said the abbot, "you are very, very kind, and I have a mind to let you try your plan. But if the worst comes to worst, you shall not die for me, I will die for myself." So the shepherd got ready to go at once. He dressed himself with great care. Over his shepherd's coat he threw the abbot's long gown, and he borrowed the abbot's cap and golden staff. When all was ready, no one in the world would have thought that he was not the great man himself. Then he mounted his horse, and with a great train of servants set out for London. Of course, the king did not know him. "Welcome, Sir Abbot," he said. "It is a good thing that you have come back. But, prompt as you are, if you fail to answer my 3 questions, you shall lose your head." "I am ready to answer them, O king," said the shepherd. "Indeed, indeed," said the king, and he laughed to himself. "Well then, answer my first question. How long shall I live?" "Come, you must tell me the very day." "You shall live," said the shepherd, "until the day that you die, and not 1 day longer. And you shall die when you take your last breath, and not 1 moment before." The king laughed. "You are witty, I see," he said, "but we will let that pass, and say that your answer is right. And now tell me, how soon I may ride around the world." "You must rise with the sun," said the shepherd, "and you must ride with the sun until it rises again the next morning. As soon as you do that, you will find that you have ridden around the world in 24 hours. The king laughed again. "Indeed," he said, "I did not think that it could be done so soon. You are not only witty, but you are wise, and we will let this answer pass. And now comes my 3rd and last question. What do I think?" "That is an easy question," said the shepherd. "You think that I am the Abbot of Canterbury, but to tell you the truth, I am only his poor shepherd, and I have come to beg your pardon for him and for me." And with that he threw off his long gown. The king laughed long and loud. "A merry fellow you are," said he, "and you shall be the Abbot of Canterbury in your master's place." "O king, that cannot be," said the shepherd, "for I can neither read nor write." "Very well then," said the king, "I will give you something else to pay you for this merry joke. I will give you 4 pieces of silver every week as long as you live, and when you get home, you may tell the old abbot that you have brought him a free pardon from King John."
A story of Robin Hood.
In the rude days of King Richard and King John, there were many great woods in England. The most famous of these was Sherwood Forest, where the king often went to hunt deer. In this forest, there lived a band of daring men called outlaws. They had done something that was against the laws of the land and had been forced to hide themselves in the woods to save their lives. There they spent their time in roaming about among the trees, in hunting the king's deer, and in robbing rich travelers that came that way. There were nearly 100 of these outlaws, and their leader was a bold fellow called Robinhood. They were dressed in suits of green and armed with bows and arrows, and sometimes they carried long wooden lances and broadswords, which they knew how to handle well. Whenever they had taken anything, it was brought and laid at the feet of Robinhood, whom they called their king. He then divided it fairly among them, giving to each man his just share. Robin never allowed his men to harm anybody but the rich men who lived in great houses and did no work. He was always kind to the poor, and he often sent help to them, and for that reason the common people looked upon him as their friend. Long after he was dead, men liked to talk about his deeds. Some praised him, and some blamed him. He was indeed a rude, lawless fellow, but at that time people did not think of right and wrong as they do now. A great many songs are made up about Robin Hood, and these songs were sung in the cottages and huts all of the land for hundreds of years afterward. Here's a little story that is told in one of those songs. Robin Hood was standing one day under a green tree by the roadside. When he was listening to the birds among the leaves, he saw a young man passing by. This young man was dressed in a fine suit of bright red cloth, and as he tripped gaily along the road, he seemed to be as happy as the day. "I will not trouble him," said Robin Hood, "for I think he is on his way to his wedding." The next day, Robin stood in the same place. He had not been there long when he saw the same young man coming down the road, but he did not seem to be so happy this time. He had left his scarlet coat at home, and at every step he sighed and groaned. "Ah, the sad day, he kept saying to himself. Then Robin Hood stepped out from under the tree and said, "I say, young man, have you any money to spare for my merry men and me?" "I have nothing at all," said the young man, "but 5 shillings and a ring." "A gold ring?" asked Robin. "Yes," said the young man, "it is a gold ring. Here it is." "Ah, I see," said Robin. "It is a wedding ring." "I have kept it these 7 years," said the young man. "I have kept it to give to my bride on our wedding day. We were going to be married yesterday, but her father has promised her to a rich old man whom she never saw, and now my heart is broken." "What's your name?" asked Robin. "My name is Alinadale," said the young man. "What will you give me in gold or fee," said Robin, "if I will help you win your bride again, in spite of the rich old man to whom she has been promised?" "I have no money," said Ellen, "but I will promise to be your servant." "How many miles is it to the place where the maiden lives?" asked Robin. "It is not far," said Allen, "but she is to be married this very day, and the church is 5 miles away." Then Robin made haste, dressed himself as a harper, and in the afternoon he stood in the door of the church. "Who are you?" said the bishop, "and what are you doing here?" "I am a bold harper," said Robin, "the best in the north country." "I am glad you have come," said the bishop kindly. "There is no music that I like so well as that of the harp. Come in and play for us." "I will go in," said Robin Hood, "but I will not give you any music until I see the bride and the bridegroom." Just then an old man came in. He was dressed in rich clothing, but was bent with age, and feeble and gray. By his side walked a fair young girl. Her cheeks were very pale, and her eyes were full of tears. "This is no match," said Robin. "Let the bride choose for herself." Then he put his horn to his lips and blew 3 times. The very next minute, 24 men, all dressed in green and carrying longbows in their hands, came running across the fields, and as they marched into the church all in a row, the foremost among them was Alinadale. "Now whom do you choose?" said Robin to the maiden. "I choose Alinadale," she said, blushing. "And Alinadale you shall have," said Robin, "and he that takes you from Alinadale shall find that he has Robin Hood to deal with." And so the fair maiden and Alinadale were married then and there, and the rich old man went home in a great rage. And thus having ended this merry wedding, the bride looked like a queen, and so they returned to the merry green wood amongst the leaves so green. Thank you for listening to these stories from 50 Famous Stories Retold by James Baldwin. I'd also like to thank John for his great story title reading this week. Please join us again next time as we continue our travels through 50 famous stories. Today's music was provided by the artist Drake Stafford. For more information, or to contact us, or to download episodes and or materials, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com. As a final thought, as you go throughout your day today, tomorrow, or whenever, remember to try and do a random act of kindness. You never know whose life might be changed by your random act, and with all the craziness in the world, spreading some kindness might be the break in the craziness that someone needs.